Good morning, my yogic travelers. I'm mighty glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are too. Going on to our third Joseph Campbell report on mythology. But I love to begin with poetry because wherever you go, a bard has probably been there before. And the beauty of poetry is A, it's language that has to be penetrated, so it starts thinking, you start thinking symbolically. And also the wide variety of what can appeal to us doesn't limit it. We're free to choose what really resonates with us. Begin. This is now. Now is all there is. Don't wait for then. Strike the spark. Light the fire. Sit at the beloved's table. Feast with gusto. Drink your fill. And then dance the way the branches of jasmine and cypress dance in the spring wind. The earth is never hurt by a bad dance, so get out there and do your thing. All right, we want to continue to live fully. And we do that when we identify ourselves with the source of all we value. We want to live, we want to embody. We want, to the extent that it's possible for a human being, to be a living representative of spirit. And one way, of course, we do that is to connect to each other. Don't be in isolation, right? People find consolation in all different kinds of things except in each other. And so leaning on other people helps to lift them up. So we want to reimagine our life, revision our life, make it much more luxuriant than it has been previously to that. So we come out of the closet, we live for spirit, and we have a psychology of extroversion as well as a psychology of introversion. Yoga teaches you both how to disengage from life in your personal practice and also engage in life in your relationships, because to be means to be related. So really important to be at play in a certain way and create a certain sense of ease. That's why I like to talk about the path of affirmation, which still people don't understand the law of attraction, how that which is like unto itself is drawn. So if you don't demonstrate these things in your life, it's probably because your mindset in terms of the relationship between thought and condition isn't completely clear. But it's like learning to tune yourself to a radio station. If you want to hear what's playing on FM 103, but your tuner is on 97.8, there's no way that you're matching the frequency. You're not a vibrational match for the transmission. So if your will is the thing that you think helps you demonstrate, here's where you're not being scientific about affirmation. The will is pushing too hard. It's not allowing yourself to let things be. You know, in the Bible, that's how creation happened. God says, let there be, and there is. So this is the part of what we would call the logos principle, or the rational part of yourself that can bring things forth into being by what you say. And your subconscious mind is listening to you all the time. It listens especially to what you say repeatedly, and it tends to help bring that more into your life. So what I would suggest is apply intelligence to every aspect of your life: thinking, reading, spending, working, dreaming, considering, and watch what happens when you start to do that. So you also have to accept the fact that if you don't want life to be nothing but a puppet being pulled by strings that you can't see, right? When do you use your will and when do you let go? This is one of the ongoing problems that we all have. But once you realize you're equal to anything with courage and faith, it's a resilience that we have as human beings. It's phenomenal. So if you're going to adopt a lifestyle where, number one, you realize that whatever you give your attention to is going to be activated within you, what are you going to let dominate your vibrations? I suggest that you learn to look at things that make you feel better more often. Find things to feel good or happy about. Don't spend a lot of time activating what you don't want. Dissolve any patterns of resistance. Increase the patterns of allowance so that all that you consider good flows easily into your experience. Then you go on what I call a rampage of appreciation. Look at everything in life that's precious to you and groove on it. Put the pedal to the metal. Juice the positive, as we used to say. But the most important thing is to make sure that you set aside time for play, for leisure living, for taking it easy, for not just always being at the grind and being productive. Don't be an idolater that worships negative things. Wound worship, I call it. Because anytime you have a problem, it's an invitation to step up and grow, use your spiritual faculties to solve those problems. But the most important thing is let the thoughts that don't serve you disappear, and then you'll see that many of the conditions that are created by those thoughts also disappear. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time to relax, build lifestyle that has leisure into it, and play. And now we can move on to what I have to say about Joseph Campbell. It's really important to distinguish the local symbol from the universal symbol, the cultic symbol from the universal symbol. Like Black Elk, the Ogallala Sioux person who said Harney Peak is the center of the universe, but everywhere is Harney Peak. He recognized that the Axis Mundi, the place that you can connect to spirit, is to a great extent reflected by the landmass that you live in. So for him, it was Harney Peak in South Dakota. But now we're at the terminal moraine of all the old myths. All the old myths are like rubble, just ruins around us, because they no longer speak to what our actual experience is. And now, although we don't know exactly what the next myth is going to be, it'll probably be planetary. Because if all the old myths were fashioned or formed by the landmass around the people, now the only myth that really makes sense is the earth is the landmass, and we're all recognizing that we have one home, the earth, and one family, humanity. It's a big jump. But the animals, the animal envoys, what they call the creature teachers, they have a lot to share with us, and we can learn from their life and their attunement to nature, because the first storytellers probably had more animals around them than human beings. And they learned that animals are already living in accord with nature. They don't have to change themselves in any way, they just have to be true, but they're instinctive. They're not having to learn about this. They're born understanding how to do certain things. It's already in their DNA. Whereas we human beings, and as a species, we're dependent for so long. Our brain is not fully formed. We have to hang out with the mother, be taken care of, protected for a long time before we can be off on our own as we go through these patterns of discipline or obedience or dependence, and then eventual maturity. And then at some point, as we age, you have to come to grips with losing powers, no longer achieving, no longer attaining, but relaxing into the wonder of it all, which is what I think I'm doing at this stage of my life, right? That's called Vanaprashta, the forest dweller. You've kind of given the mantle of power onto the next generation, and now you're just kind of easing into the relationship between now and the end of my life, when I'm going to move from body to not body. So I identify the body as a vehicle of consciousness, and I have always been grappling since the time I was a young man with the idea of what is death. What does it happen when all of a sudden there's an animated form in front of you, it's breathing, it's conscious, it's moving, and now all of a sudden something happens where something has been taken away. Whatever it was that made this person conscious and active, alive, it's not there anymore. There's just this shell. What happened to this person? And then you have to decide, is whatever left the person the most important part of them that made them conscious and capable of movement and action? So Martin Buber calls the relationship between yourself and the world I and thou. It's really interesting to look at the world as a thou instead of the world as an it, and the different orientation that gives you when you're able to personify it that way. The ancient teachings understood, first of all, the importance of women as the mother that gestates the baby for all that time and then takes care of it, feeds it with the milk of kindness directly. That kind of bond is so deep. And so it's important to recognize the society that worships women is usually a really good society. A society that takes advantage of women in any way, not good. But this is mythic. This isn't just in the Western patriarchal tradition. This is all over the world. The understanding of the Earth Mother, the Divine Mother, Mother Nature, the vehicle of life. She literally carries you and nurses you. That keeps you alive and protects you. So man serves something greater than oneself by honoring women and protecting them in their society. Now, to understand this, you have to get into a kind of elite state of mind, which means like you got to be an artist, because the artist is the person who hears the sound or sees the vision and somehow brings it into a form that helps to mythologize your environment, so that we create rituals which are enactments of myth. And remember, myth is totally false on the outside, but totally true on the inside. What is it trying to teach us? So when it comes to the animal envoys, which are guides of the unseen power, just think about how much a person loves their dog or their cat, right? But even through history, whether it's right away in the garden, the snake is speaking, or in the Irish folk tales where the horse of power turns around and tells you what to do and how to do it, or in the Bible when the prophet who's been hired to come and curse the Israelites, the donkey sees the angel in front of him and rears back and starts talking to the prophet, telling him why are you beating me? Don't you see what's going on? There are so many stories where apparently what we think of as these dumb domesticated animals all of a sudden have the power to let us know what's going on, right? And then if we see that there's a reflection, an instinctive reflection of what animals do without self-consciousness, that we do also, eat, sleep, mate, procreate, stay alive, self-preservation. We do the same thing. Animals are so important to teaching us about our own nature, about love, about compassion, and also on the flip side, we've done a lot of nasty things to animals as we domesticate them and use them for our own benefit in terms of meat and milk and workforce. So that's another thing. You can tell a lot about a culture or yourself by how you treat animals, or even bugs. And I'm not saying you have to be like a Jane and wear a mask and brush the dirt in front of you so you don't accidentally step on an insect. But it teaches you something about reverence for life. So put yourself in accord with nature and then live for something greater than yourself. And so if that's going to be the way we deal with life, then I'm going to suggest to you a little poem called, a little affirmation called The Shock Absorber. The Shock Absorber, because there's a lot of things that happen in life that kind of smack you upside the head, and how do you rebound from that? Spirit is my shock absorber to the bumpy ruts of life. I dissolve patterns of resistance. I embrace patterns of allowance. I look at things that make me feel better more often. I find good things to be happy about. I let them dominate my vibration. All that I consider good flows easily into my experience. I hope that's true for you as well.